Hello everybody and welcome to a very special video. In this video I'm going to give a thorough overview of some of the most useful Indian languages and scripts for GeoGuessr. India's a country that's had coverage for a while, but in recent years it's received a whole lot of new coverage in a bunch of states that didn't have coverage before. It's a little bit controversial because the camera quality is often really bad, but it's slowly being added to more and more maps. I'm sure many of you are aware that a couple of months ago it got added to ACW, so you'll encounter India when you're playing ranked duels and competitive modes. So I figured that I'd make a document and a guide on Indian scripts and languages to help people out, because they're some of the most useful metas that you can know for India. So a quick introduction to this guide. India has a huge number of languages. Estimates put it between about 450 and 1600. For the purposes of GeoGuessr, being able to distinguish between these languages is very useful, mainly because you don't necessarily have to know the language itself. Distinguishing between different languages can be achieved simply by looking at the scripts and alphabets used. So the aim of this guide is to outline the differences between most of the 22 scheduled languages of India. Those are the languages that the Indian government has placed priority on. They're acknowledged in the constitution. And I cover most of those in this guide. Some, like Sanskrit, which is the holy language of Hinduism. It's used for a whole bunch of Hindu texts and stuff. I haven't covered that because you'll very rarely see Sanskrit written anywhere in GeoGuessr. Now, again, this guide is designed primarily with GeoGuessr in mind, so I'm not going to discuss differences in grammar or spelling or vocab. I'm going to entirely focus on looking at languages based on the script used. This guide isn't comprehensive. The languages are just some of the most commonly spoken ones, and then the ones that you'll see the most in GeoGuessr. But hopefully a knowledge of the information in this guide should prove at least somewhat useful in about 95% of rounds where you see a sign or some language. I'm going to refer a lot by name to the 28 states and union territories of India. I recommend that you familiarize yourselves with those, but obviously I'll refer to maps and you'll get an idea of where they are in general. Also, I don't speak any of the languages in this guide. I'm not an expert on languages in general. If you spot that I've made some errors, please feel free to DM me on Discord and point those out. I will be more than happy to receive corrections and try and continue to make this guide as useful as possible. I'm going to work through the languages from roughly the top of India to the bottom. I think it makes sort of the most sense in terms of a nice geographical progression. So without further ado, let's jump into the first language, which is Kashmiri. So Kashmiri is spoken by about 7 million Kashmiris who reside in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which is right up the top of India. As you can see on this map here, the vast majority of people who speak Kashmiri live right up the top of India, near the border of Pakistan. Kashmiri is primarily written using the Perso-Arabic script, which looks like a lot of other Arabic scripts, and the Devanagari script, which we'll see a lot of later in this document. The Devanagari script is like the default Hindi script, but it's used to write a bunch of other languages as well. Kashmiri, unfortunately, is one of the least useful languages of GeoGuessr because Jammu and Kashmir has no coverage. If I jump over to Google Maps, we can see Jammu and Kashmir up here, and you'll note that there's no coverage here. There's a few isolated trekkers and there's some unofficial coverage, but you should never encounter Jammu and Kashmir in GeoGuessr, compared to, say, all of the rest of India, which has, huge amounts of coverage. Yeah, any sightings of Kashmiri outside Jammu and Kashmir are extremely rare, like almost unheard of. So yeah, unfortunately you won't get much use out of Kashmiri in GeoGuessr. But a fun fact about Kashmiri, it has verb second word order, so the verb comes second after the object, so that yesterday she kicked the ball would become yesterday kicked she the ball. The next language is Dogri. So, like Kashmiri, the vast majority of Dogri speakers, of whom there are about 2.6 million, reside in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Again, Jammu and Kashmir has no coverage. Also, Dogri was historically written using the Dogri script, Name Dogra Akar. However, that script's now functionally extinct. All modern Dogri text is written in Devanagari, like a lot of texts that where there used to be a script for the language, but it's mostly died out, and often it's just written in Devanagari now. There is, however, a town in Jammu, so Jammu in Jammu and Kashmir. They, a few years ago, erected some signs at the train station which are written in the Dogri script, which was very cool. Unfortunately, again, not very useful for GeoGuessr because there's no coverage in Jammu and Kashmir. Next, we move on to a language that is very useful for GeoGuessr purposes, which is Punjabi. So Punjabi is spoken by about 30 million people. Those people reside in the state of Punjab, small numbers in northern Rajasthan and Haryana. It's also spoken by a bunch of people in Pakistan, but again, because Pakistan doesn't have very much coverage, all of the Punjabi that you're going to see written on signs will be in India for GeoGuessr purposes. As you can see, another language that is up north, I'll show on a map. The state of Punjab here is where the vast majority of Punjabi speakers will reside. Punjabi is written using the Gurmukhi script, which looks like this. You can see the example here. The Gurmukhi script, like Devanagari and a number of other related scripts, features this horizontal line that you can see running along the top of letters. However, the majority of characters in Gurmukhi are quite distinct to those in Devanagari. So Gurmukhi is a pretty easy script to identify compared to other scripts. I've put here a few examples of some of the most distinct characters. This wishbone character, you'll see that a lot, that's pretty distinct. This one that looks quite similar. This one with the squiggles, this shape as well. A lot of those characters are very distinct. Again, if you look at Punjabi text or written in Gurmukhi script, you'll notice it a fair bit. Note that Gurmukhi is not the only script used in Punjab state. It's very common to see signs written in Devanagari as well as Gurmukhi. And there's an example here on a sign. You'll note there's two different scripts used. The top one is Devanagari, and that's used to write Hindi, and then the bottom one is in Gurmukhi, and that's used to write the same text in Punjabi. Punjabi, interestingly enough, is unusual amongst Indo-Aryan languages, which are most of the languages up in the north of India. It's a tonal language, similar to, say, Mandarin Chinese. Punjabi is a tonal language that's actually quite rare among Indo-Aryan languages. So, just to show a quick example, this is a sign in Punjabi. You can see the Punjabi text here. This is in the Devanagari script. So yeah, you can see the difference between the two different characters used, those wishbone characters. Yeah, and you'll see, if you move around, signs written in English, those are found in a lot of places in India, but yeah, you'll also find this is written in Devanagari, but if you spend enough time looking at signs in Punjab, you'll see, yes, so this is written in Punjabi, that character there, well, most of the characters here, but yeah, being able to recognize specific characters is very useful. So moving on, next we have Hindi. Hindi is the most widely spoken language in India by a pretty wide margin. There's approximately 528 million people who speak it as their first language, and a vast number of other people in India who speak it as a second or third language. By far the greatest concentration of Hindi speakers, as you can see on the map, is in the northern half of India. It's the most commonly spoken language in the states of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Bihar. Kota and Chhattisgarhi, which are considered to be dialects of Hindi under the Indian census and use the same Devanagari script, are also the most commonly spoken languages in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Hindi is also spoken to a much lesser extent throughout southern India, most commonly as a second language. So you will often see signs written in Hindi alongside southern languages in the south of India. Hindi and the many dialects of Hindi or other languages are almost always written in the Devanagari script. One of the distinguishing features of Devanagari is the horizontal line that runs across the top of the letters. That's a common feature amongst a lot of the northern languages of India. However, several other languages in India share this feature, including Bengali, Punjabi, and Marathi. Distinguishing between these languages requires knowledge of characters specific to each language. It's much easier actually to look at how languages differ or scripts differ from Devanagari rather than trying to compare the Devanagari script to other ones. So I'm mainly going to focus on distinguishing scripts from Devanagari and Hindi rather than the other way around. You can see here a sign in Delhi that is written in Hindi using Devanagari script and English. And this is something that you'll see all over India. So this is again in New Delhi, all of these signs written mostly in Hindi using Devanagari. There's some English as well. You'll also find signs that are written in just English, like this. Again, you'll find those all across the country, but yeah, text on the walls, you move anywhere, and you'll probably find Hindi written somewhere, more Hindi written on the wall there, just huge amounts of it in the northern half of the country. Again, in Madhya Pradesh, all of these signs are written using Hindi using the Devanagari script. Again, noting the horizontal line that connects letters up the top. If you go out further west to Rajasthan, which is this state here, so the state in the more deserty area, out to the far west, you'll find plenty of Devanagari there, all of these signs written in Hindi. And if you go out pretty far east to Chhattisgarh, you'll also find plenty of Hindi. So most of the northern states of India speak Hindi or some closely related language to Hindi, and they'll pretty much always use the Devanagari script. The next language is Urdu. So Urdu is the 7th most spoken language in India. There's about 63 million total speakers as of the 2011 census. Urdu and Hindi share a common vocabulary base, phonology, and grammar, so they're pretty much mutually intelligible in day-to-day conversation. However, when you get to a more technical level, Urdu draws from Persian and Hindi draws from Sanskrit. So as you get more and more formal and technical, the two languages diverge more and more from each other, and you get less and less mutual intelligibility. There's been a lot of debate as to whether Hindi and Urdu are different languages. I'm not going to elaborate on that too much here. It's not really a topic that I'm an expert in at all. However, the general consensus by modern scholars is that Hindi and Urdu are two differently standardized forms of the same language, which is often referred to as Hindustani or Hindi Urdu. Compared to other Indian languages with a similar number of speakers, Urdu is less useful for the purposes of GeoGuessr. As you can see on the map, it's pretty widespread across a lot of India. This is because Urdu, rather than being limited to a geographic region, it tends to be spoken wherever there are large Muslim minorities or in cities that have been historically the bases of Muslim empires. So these include parts of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. So yeah, a whole lot of states in the north, in the south. It's also spoken by a number of Muslim citizens in major cities: Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Lucknow, and so on. So yeah, just if you spend enough time clicking through these cities, you'll probably find a sign written in Urdu in most of the major cities, just because there are Muslim populations there and they'll often speak Urdu and write things in Urdu. So I've seen signs in Urdu in Bengaluru, in Kolkata, in Delhi, in a whole lot of cities across the country. So theoretically, knowledge of the major cities that don't have a significant number of Urdu speakers or Urdu signage might prove useful, but I haven't attempted any research along that line. That's for somebody with a lot more time and dedication than me to do. Now, in terms of recognizing Urdu, Urdu's written using an extension of the Persian alphabet, which is itself an extension of the Arabic alphabet. That's why it looks like Arabic. The alphabet is most commonly written in the Nastaliq script, a form of calligraphy. Here I've got an example of Urdu written in the Naskh script, which is pretty similar to the Nastaliq script, except it's the version that's most commonly used for digitization. So digital text will use the Naskh script, whereas if you look at calligraphy or written texts, that'll use the Nastaliq script. So you'll find Urdu in a lot of places, often alongside other languages. So this is a sign in New Delhi that features English up the top, Hindi in the Devanagari script, and Urdu in the Nastaliq script that's in New Delhi. Also, fun fact, Urdu, like other Arabic and Persian languages and also Hebrew, it's written right to left. So you can see that in the example here, it's written going from the right to the left rather than most other Indian languages. Obviously, Urdu is pretty recognizable using that distinct Perso-Arabic script, but yeah, unfortunately it isn't very useful for GeoGuessr purposes because you tend to find it in a lot of places, especially in big cities. Next we have Maithili. Maithili is commonly spoken in India in the states of Bihar and northern Jharkhand, as well as in Nepal. It's the second most commonly spoken language in Nepal after Nepali. Within India, there are an estimated 14 million Maithili speakers. Maithili is predominantly written using the Devanagari script, and unfortunately distinguishing Maithili written in Devanagari from other languages written using Devanagari, you'd need to know the language and be able to read it, and that's definitely beyond the scope of this video. However, historically Maithili was written using two scripts, Terhuta and Kaiti. In recent years, the usage of these two scripts has dropped dramatically, so they're almost useless for GeoGuessr purposes. I couldn't find any examples of the two languages or any of those two scripts on Google Street View coverage. However, I've included a couple of examples in the rare event that you find a sign using either script. So Terhuta is almost identical to the Bengali script, which we'll cover shortly. There are 7 characters in Terhuta, at least in the modern Unicode formatting, that are distinct from Bengali Assamese. Those are these ones. You can have a look at those for yourself. I won't bother to go through each one of those. Then you have the Kaiti script, which doesn't feature a horizontal line, and it's got a number of distinct characters. This one that looks like a Greek theta, this one that looks kind of like a grid or a space invader, a couple of other characters as well. That was also used to write Maithili. Kaiti was historically used to write several Indo-Aryan languages, including Hindustani, Bhojpuri, and Magahi. However, use of Kaiti has died out completely in most areas. It's been supplanted again, like numerous languages, by Devanagari. In Bihar, however, Kaiti was the official court script from 1950 to 1954 and continued to be used for official documentation for a considerable period afterwards. So most of the modern day instances of Kaiti usage, which is this script here, can be found in Bihar, which is this state here that's just south of Nepal. So if for some reason you happen to find a Kaiti script somewhere in India, you're almost certainly going to be in Bihar, because that's pretty much the only spots where you'll see it used to write anything nowadays. I've only ever seen images of it used as signs on like sites of historical importance where they want to use the old script, but it's possible that somewhere you might find, you know, some graffiti. But yeah, definitely not the most useful language for GeoGuessr. Next, however, we move on to an extremely useful language for GeoGuessr purposes, Bengali. So Bengali is the second most spoken language in India. There's almost 100 million people who speak it. It's by far the most commonly spoken language in the area centered around Bangladesh, in West Bengal, Tripura, and Assam. So Tripura is this state here that kind of cuts into Bangladesh, and Bengali is spoken there. Bengali is spoken in West Bengal, and it's also spoken a huge amount in Assam. A few other languages are more common in Nagaland and Manipur. We'll get to Manipur later in the video, but yeah, in those 3 states, West Bengal, Tripura, and Assam, are where you find the vast majority of the Bengali speakers in India. Bengali is written using the Bengali Assamese script, and at a first glance this can look very similar to Hindi, and it's easy to confuse this script with Devanagari. They both feature a horizontal line at the top of the letters. However, the construction and shape of the letters is quite different. So some examples of characters that are quite easily recognizable are these ones here. Obviously, I'd argue that most of them are pretty distinct, but these are just some examples of ones that I think are particularly distinct. And yeah, if you spend enough time comparing the two, it should be reasonably easy to tell them apart. In general, in Bengali, you'll see more angular characters, These ones that sort of feature triangle shapes are pretty distinct compared to the ones in Hindi using Devanagari. So here you can see a sign that sort of compares the two languages. You can see Bengali on the left and Hindi in Devanagari on the right, and you can see that, yeah, they're pretty distinct. It's pretty easy to tell the difference between the two of them. And here's a city in West Bengal. This is the coverage. And you'll see, yeah, all the signs are written in Bengali. So that's Bengali there. This sign here, that's Bengali. This sign here, that's Bengali. This is Bengali here. That's Bengali there. This is Bengali. That's Bengali. It's all Bengali. So yeah, in West Bengal, you'll see huge amounts of Bengali. Next, we have a very closely related language to Bengali, which is Assamese. So Assamese is spoken by about 15 million people who live in Assam. Assamese, it's pretty easy to remember, very closely related to Bengali, Maithili, Chittagonian, Sylheti, which are Chittagonian and Sylheti are spoken in Bangladesh. A lot of very similar, closely related languages. Like Bengali, Assamese is written using the Bengali Assamese script, but there's a couple of key differences. They'd almost be indistinguishable, but there are two differences that will help you easily tell them apart. I haven't seen these covered in any other GeoGuessr guide, so I want to put particular emphasis on these here because I think they're really useful. And hopefully, yeah, you'll get good use out of them. So Assamese uses this character for the rho sound, whereas Bengali uses this one. That's by far the easiest way to tell them apart. There's one other tip. Assamese has an extra letter, this one here, that Bengali does not. That one doesn't come up that often, but when it does, that's another way to tell them apart. Simply being able to recognize this character here, though, should be enough to tell the languages apart in most cases. And again, not many people know about this. So it's very, very useful and should hopefully help you score some points on it when you're playing India or in duels. So this is a sign, an example. This is in Assam, written using the Bengali Assamese script with that character that is distinct to Assam. So I've circled that in red. That's what that one looks like. And again, you'll only see that when you're in Assam, which is this sort of region here. I'll show that on the map. This state here of Assam in this sort of northern bit of India that juts out. You'll find Assam in that sort of Assamese texts in that area. So, moving on, next we have Boro, or Bodo. This is a pretty niche one, but I think it's actually kind of useful if you know you're in Assam. So, Boro is a Sino-Tibetan language that's spoken by the Boro people who live in the Bodoland territorial region that's in northwestern Assam. So on the map, that's sort of this area here that stretches from the western border of Assam here to sort of about Tezpur or so. And it's sort of this the northern half of that slice of land above the river. So yeah, from about Tezpur to the border here, the northern half is where Boro will be spoken. Boro is written in Devanagari since 1975. It's pretty much impossible to distinguish Boro from other languages that are written in Devanagari unless you speak the language. However, in a very particular situation, Boro can prove very useful. If you know you're in Assam and a significant proportion of the signs are written in Devanagari, with very few written in Bengali, it's highly likely that you're in the Bodoland territorial region. So, if you know you're in Assam, and you see very little Bengali, mostly Devanagari, like this sign here, this is in the Bodoland territorial region, and in that town when I was scanning through, all of the signs were in Devanagari. So if you're in Assam and you see all Devanagari, click Northwest Assam in this region highlighted red on the map. Next we move to Meitei. So there's about 1.76 million native speakers in India of Meitei according to the 2011 census. Most of those live in Manipur, of which Meitei is the official language and also the lingua franca spoken amongst, the people in everyday conversation. It's a language that's closely related to a lot of languages that are spoken in Myanmar. So it's not related very closely to languages like Bengali or Hindu at all. It's from another language group. So Meitei is written using the Meitei script, which looks like this. It's very distinct, a beautiful script. Very cool story. Meitei was written using the Meitei script until about the 18th century, when it was largely replaced by Bengali. However, in the 20th century, it saw a massive revival, which represents one of the most successful instances of a revival of a historical script in Indian history. There's a lot of scripts that have died out. They got replaced by other more commonly used scripts. Like I've mentioned, there's a bunch that used to be written in their own distinct script, but are now just written in Devanagari. But Meitei nowadays is mostly written using the Meitei script, and in 2021, the use of Meitei script to write Meitei was officially adopted by the government of Manipur, alongside Bengali script. So I've got an example here. This is a sign that features some signs in Imphal, which is the capital of Manipur. There's a bunch of signs here written in Meitei script, but unfortunately, Meitei script is almost useless for GeoGuessr purposes because Manipur has no official coverage. So if you look on the map, a bunch of these eastern states have coverage, but Nagaland and Manipur have none. So you won't even really see Meitei script in the neighboring states in Mizoram or in Meghalaya or Assam. I did a pretty thorough search near the border areas of Manipur and I couldn't find any instances of Meitei script being used. It's pretty much something that you'll only see in Manipur. But for the sake of future-proofing this document, I've included it because hopefully Manipur will get some coverage someday. And also the script is very beautiful, so I just wanted to include it in the document. Hopefully it will become useful in the future. Next we move on to Santali. So Santali is spoken by about 7 million people in India. It's most commonly spoken by the Santal people in the states of Jharkhand and West Bengal. There's also some populations of those speakers in Odisha, Bihar and Assam. Until about the 1800s, Santali had no written language. Initially it was written in Bangla, Devanagari, Kalinga and Latin script. However, Santali isn't an Indo-Aryan language. It's not related to much of the languages in northern India very closely at all, and those scripts that they were using didn't have all the letters that they needed to write Santali. So it was not until 1925 that the Old Cheeky script was created for writing Santali by the poet Raghunath Murmu. So the script was published in 1949 and it's now widely accepted amongst a lot of the Santal people for writing their language. So in West Bengal, Odisha and Jharkhand, Old Cheeky is actually the official script recognized by the government for Santaki. And it's a very distinct script. There's no horizontal bar, a lot of very circular looking characters that kind of reflect the recent invention of the script. It was created for the specific purpose of writing this language and doesn't really have a historical basis. The poet Murmu actually designed the letters to reflect the names for the letters, which are words, usually the names of objects or actions. So the characters or the letters are mostly look or are some kind of abstract depiction of a real life object or an action, which is very cool. You don't see a lot of Old Chiki written on signs. I did a fair bit of searching around when I was looking through coverage, and I could find only very few instances. So unfortunately, Old Chiki and the Santali language are pretty not very useful for the purposes of GeoGuessr. But you will see some instances from time to time, especially as usage of the language and of the script is growing. So hopefully in future years, as GeoGuessr coverage continues to update, we'll continue to see more and more examples of Old Chiki script and Santali language within India. I do, however, have a photo. There's a sign here from a train station in Odisha where you can see third from the bottom. This script here is Old Chiki. Very cool to see. Next, we move on to Gujarati. So Gujarati is spoken by about 55 million people. Almost all of those are in the state of Gujarat. Again, another one that's pretty easy to remember where they are. Gujarati is spoken in Gujarat. So to point out where that is, Gujarat is this westernmost state. It's pretty deserty. It includes all of this peninsula and the area that extends up to Pakistan and goes sort of west and borders Madhya Pradesh and some other states. And you can see, yeah, that's where all the Gujarati speakers will mostly be, and where all the signs with Gujarati language on it. Gujarati is written using the Gujarati alphabet. It's a variant of the Devanagari script, and you can distinguish it from Devanagari by the lack of a horizontal bar. There's slight differences between some of the characters. Again, if you spend a bit of time looking at signs, looking at some text and some examples, have a scroll through this document, you should be able to get a sense of what script is what. It's a very, very useful language for GeoGuessr purposes. It's very region-specific, confined almost entirely to Gujarat. It's extremely easy to identify. It looks like Devanagari, but without the horizontal line that connects letters. So if we have a look, this is Street View in Gujarat. These signs are in Gujarati, again, no horizontal bar. And if we move along, there's this sign here is written in Gujarati, this one here is in Gujarati. That sign is in Gujarati. The text on that taxi is in Gujarati. I could go on for ages, but yeah, if you're in Gujarat, you're going to see huge amounts of signs written in Gujarati. So, moving on now to Marathi. Marathi is the fourth most spoken language in India, with an estimated 99 million total speakers in the 2011 census. So it's the native language and the official language of the state of Maharashtra, which, if you look at it on the map, is sort of the state south of Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. It extends pretty far down the coast to Goa, and pretty far west all the way up to this northern border here, and sort of curves down. It's a very big state with a huge population. Marathi is written using a variant of Devanagari script called Balbod. Here's an example of Balbod. It looks very, very similar to Devanagari and Hindi. So it's extremely easy to mistake the two for each other, and there's really only two ways to distinguish the two if you don't know the language. So, somewhat notoriously in the GeoGuessr community, this is probably one of the most well-known Indian language tips. Balbod script used to write Marathi has this exclusive character. If we want to get technical, it's a voiced fricative. I believe a voiced alveolar fricative, if we're being very, very technical. But essentially, you can just think of it as the infinity symbol. So it looks like a closed infinity loop. It's very important to distinguish it from these two characters, which can look quite similar. This one often is written slightly differently and looks even closer to the infinity, especially depending on the type font, or the typeset or the font used. Those two characters can look quite similar, so it's important to know how to tell the difference. The important thing is that the only one where the infinity is closed up all the way around is this one. So if it's not closed fully, you know that it's not Marathi. Now, note that Marathi also uses these two characters, so if you see these two, you could still be in Maharashtra. But if you see this character, you're pretty much only going to be in Maharashtra, nowhere else. Another lesser known but also useful Balbod exclusive character is this one. It's called the eyelash ref. It's an alternative form of this character here, Ra. When Ra is the first consonant in a consonant cluster and occurs at the beginning of a syllable, it's written not as this character but as the eyelash ref, this one. So you can identify it as a small horizontal line emerging out the left of another letter. So some examples here, you can see this small horizontal line coming out to the left, this one here, and so on and so forth, a bunch of examples. Those are all the eyelash ref. And that's another example of a character that's exclusive to Marathi. Now this one, the eyelash ref, is much less common than the infinity symbol, and you can pretty much rely on the infinity symbol alone, but that's one's just another useful one to know of in the rare instances that it does come up. So again, like Gujarati, Marathi is very, very useful for GeoGuessr purposes. It's very region specific, but it is slightly harder to identify. So I've got an advertisement here. You can see there's that Marathi exclusive character, that infinity sign, and if you see that, click Maharashtra. Next, we move on to Odia, which is the language of Odisha state. It's also spoken in very small amounts in parts of West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, but again, if you see Odia, click Odisha. So on the map, Odisha is this state here, the westernmost state, well, no, not the westernmost state, but one of the west states along the coast, north of Telangana and south of Jharkhand and West Bengal and Chhattisgarh. So that's where Odisha is, and that's where you'll find all of the Odia text. So Odia is written using the Odia script. That's this one here. And it's very, very recognizable. It's perhaps most easily distinguished by the large number of characters where it's capped by a rounded line. So you can see on a number of these characters, there's a rounded line that goes over the top of the characters, so that some people describe them as looking a little bit like skulls. So you can see again an advertisement where there's a bunch of characters written in the Odia script. This is in Odisha. A very cool fact, the curved appearance of the Odia script arose because historically it was written on palm leaves, which would tear if you wrote too many straight lines on them. So as you can see, all of the characters are very curvy. There aren't that many straight lines. So you can see, if I go to some Street View in Odisha, these signs are all written in Odia. You can see the distinct curved characters. If I move, we should see there's some more Odia script there. This sign is written in Odia. It's good to click around some of the coverage as well, because often in the coverage with the Google camera quality being really bad, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between the languages because the quality is so low. So it's really good to get some practice in at distinguishing them and be able to tell at a glance, oh yes, that's Odia. Next we have Telugu. So Telugu is the 5th most spoken language in India. Again, almost 100 million people who speak it. It's the most spoken language in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and about 83% of Telugu speakers live in those two states. So if you see Telangana or Telugu, click Telangana or Andhra Pradesh almost all of the time. So you can see there's Telangana and there's Andhra Pradesh. So if you see Telugu, click those two. Telugu is written using the Telugu script, which looks like this. Now, a lot of people have difficulty distinguishing between Telugu and Kannada. So Telugu is in Andhra Pradesh, and Kannada is spoken in Karnataka. And if I zoom in and look at the place names, you'll note that these characters here can look very similar to these ones here. And if I actually zoom into somewhere near a border where there's a mix, so on the left of the screen you've got Kannada, and on the right of the screen you've got Telugu, they can look very, very similar. But there's an easy way to tell the difference between them. The easiest way to distinguish Telugu from Kannada is the significant number of characters with tick marks on the top. So a lot of the characters are very similar. They make the same sound and they're written in a very similar manner between Telugu and Kannada. They have very close origins in terms of the phonetics and the grammar. So in Telugu, there's a tick mark on top of the characters. Whereas in Kannada, the characters are topped by what some people call eyebrows. So these characters are the same, they make the same sound, and they look very similar. The difference is, like, this one and this one are identical, apart from the fact that this one has the tick mark on the top, and this one has the eyebrow. So the tick mark is Telugu, and the eyebrow is Kannada. Once you know the marks, distinguishing between the two languages is quite easy. Again, Telugu, very useful for GeoGuessr, highly region-specific and easily distinguishable. There's a sign here in Andhra Pradesh, and you can see again all those tick marks. And if I go to some coverage in Andhra Pradesh, you'll see a lot of different fonts used to write Telugu, but they should all have those distinct tick marks. If I go here, I have a good example here. You'll see a lot of fonts for the southern languages where they're kind of made to be more boxy or square, but you can still distinguish the tick marks, especially on this character here. The tick marks are still distinct in a lot of these boxier fonts. We've got more Telugu here. You'll see Telugu everywhere if you're in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh. Now moving on, I've mentioned this already, but Kannada, about 43 million speakers, and 93% of those live in Karnataka. So if you see Kannada, click Karnataka. Kannada is written using the Kannada script, as we've discussed. Looks very similar to Telugu, but with the eyebrows instead of the tick marks. Cool fact, Kannada has an unbroken literary history of over 1,000 years, and it's one of India's 6 designated classical languages, alongside Sanskrit, Telugu, Tamil, Odia, and Malayalam. So here's an advertisement, as I showed with the example of Telugu in the Street View. You'll get a lot of fonts that are very boxy and highly stylized, but in this advertisement, the eyebrows above characters are still recognizable. And here's an example in Street View. You've got Kannada here, again the eyebrows, more Kannada here, Kannada on all of these signs. Essentially this panorama is just full of Kannada language, as you'll see in so many locations in Karnataka. Next we have Konkani. So Konkani is spoken by about 2 million people, most of whom are in Goa or the surrounds of Goa, in Karnataka, Maharashtra and Kerala. So looking at it on a map, Goa is this really small state, little pocket. To the north you have Maharashtra, to the east you have Karnataka, and to the south you have Kerala, which is this really long state that covers most of the southeast coast. So Goa is kind of a pocket, and surrounding this pocket is where you'll find most of the Konkani speakers. Konkani is a bit of a mess, language and script-wise. It's written in 5 different scripts: Devanagari, the Roman script, Kannada, Malayalam, and Perso-Arabic. So a huge number of scripts used for distinguishing Konkani. That's due to a vast variety of historical reasons. That area has been colonized by a whole lot of different powers. And so that's given rise to quite a varied sort of linguistic descendants today. Konkani is frequently written in Latin, but Devanagari is the official script for Konkani in Goa and Maharashtra. So most of the Konkani that you see written will be in Devanagari. However, it's also frequently written in Roman because Konkani literature was written in Latin script under the Catholic Church. Also, most Konkani speakers in Karnataka use the Kannada script, and most Muslim Konkani speakers use Perso-Arabic. So it's a bit of a linguistic and script nightmare. Another unfortunate thing is that Konkani is actually at risk of dying out due to the increasing fragmentation of the language into multiple mutually unintelligible dialects. But that's a modern history lesson that's beyond the scope of this guide. Konkani isn't that useful for GeoGuessr purposes. There are no characters in any of the scripts that are used to write Konkani that are exclusive to Konkani. However, there is one tip that I can give. The historical emphasis on the Roman script in Goa state and the surrounding region can be used to inform some of your guesses. So Goa has one of the highest proportions of English speakers of any Indian state. If you look at this diagram, you'll see a lot in New Delhi and a lot in Meghalaya. So another tip, if you see a lot of English but also a little bit of Bengali, definitely consider clicking Meghalaya. Meghalaya has a very large proportion of English speakers. So huge number of English speakers in Meghalaya, but also in Delhi and also in Goa. So if you see a large proportion of signs written in English and you know you're in the southern half of India, consider guessing in Goa. So here's an advertisement. You've got Konkani written in Devanagari, and then there's also English. And this is in Goa. So if we look at an example here, I've got an example in Goa, in Margao, one of the biggest cities in Goa. You'll notice that nearly all of the signs are written in English. So all of these signs are written in English. If I go along this road, English, English, English. The vast majority of the signs in Goa, especially in the biggest cities, will be written in English. More English, again a little bit of Devanagari script, but the vast majority that you'll see is all going to be written in English. So, next we move on to Malayalam. So Malayalam is spoken by about 36 million people, and 90% of those, more than 90% actually, live in Kerala. So if you see Malayalam, click Kerala. Very, very small populations in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Maharashtra. But if you see Malayalam, again, click Kerala. So Malayalam is written using the Malayalam script. That's what it looks like. It's a very distinct script. Some of the most recognizable characters are these ones, but realistically speaking, a lot of them are very distinct. Perhaps the language that it most closely resembles are like Tamil, or perhaps also Odia in Odisha. You could potentially get those two confused, but hopefully Malayalam should be distinct from those two. It's difficult to describe the exact differences, but if you spend enough time looking at examples, you should be able to tell the difference. Here's an example, an advertisement that's written in Malayalam, and if we go to Street View, this is in Kerala, which by the way is this southern state that stretches from about Mangaluru down to pretty much close to the bottom of India along the southwest coast. So within Kerala, you're going to see large amounts of Malayalam. So here's an example. All of these signs here written in Malayalam. That road sign there. If we click along, that sign is written in Malayalam, but it's a bit difficult to see. That advertisement is, and so on and so forth. So, last but not least, we come to Tamil. So Tamil is the 6th most commonly spoken language in India. About 77 million people speak it, and the vast majority of Tamil speakers live in Tamil Nadu, as well as the Union of Puducherry, which is just mostly a bunch of coastal states or coastal cities. So this is Puducherry, this is Puducherry. I think there's also one other city somewhere, I forget where, that's also part of Puducherry, but essentially those are all surrounded by Tamil Nadu. So this southern state here that covers a good portion of the southernmost part of India, Tamil Nadu, is where you'll find Tamils on signs and that's where you'll find Tamil in GeoGuessr. Tamil is written using the Tamil script, which is pretty distinct. Again, it's difficult to describe exactly the most distinct features or how to identify Tamil. It's just something that you should hopefully be able to pick up with enough practice of looking at different scripts. Perhaps the best way of thinking about it is that you've got a combination of right-angled box type characters and then also flowing curves. So you see a lot of these characters have a combination of right angles and then also a flowing curvy part. Also, a lot of dots above the characters is something that's pretty distinct to Tamil, but definitely you'll see dots on other scripts. Again, another hugely useful language because it's highly recognizable and region specific. So here's an example in Puducherry where you've got Tamil script on a sign. And here's an example. This is in Tamil Nadu. This sign is written in Tamil. This one's in Tamil. This one's in Tamil. All of these are in Tamil. So yeah, very, very easy to distinguish from other letters if you spend enough time sort of clicking around and comparing them. So, with that said, at the end of the guide, if you want some more practice and want to have a reference for distinguishing between scripts, I've got an index of scripts at the end of this guide, where I have an example of the scripts or the letters used in each of the different scripts that I mention in this document. So you can look at these for a reference. We've got Devanagari, Perso-Arabic, Naam Dogra Akar, Gurmukhi, Nastaliq, Terhuta, Kaiti, Bengali Assamese, Meitei, Santali, which is written in the old Cheeky script, Gujarati, Marathi in the Balbod script, Odia, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil. I haven't included in this guide a description of Sanskrit, as I mentioned previously, mainly because that is something that you pretty much only see on, like, technical texts, the sort of stuff that's for books in religious libraries. It's rare, if ever, that you'll see Sanskrit on a sign anywhere in India. I've mentioned as well English, but I caution against putting too much emphasis on English. You'll see a large proportion of English in a number of large cities in India: Delhi, Hyderabad, Bengaluru. Big cities, you'll often have a high proportion of people who have learned to speak English, often as a second or third language, and so you'll see a lot of signs written in English. And the number of English speakers in India is continually on the rise. So yeah, I would caution against basing your guesses in India on seeing English. However, as I pointed out, there are a couple of areas within India where English is very commonly spoken. So if you see almost only signs in English, then keep in mind these areas where English is spoken very commonly. But with all of that said, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope that you find a lot of the tips in this video very useful, and that you feel much more confident about distinguishing the different languages in India based on the scripts. It's something that seems rather daunting at first, but once you get a bit of practice down, it's actually surprisingly easy, and it helps narrow down your region guessing in a huge country like India a lot. Again, if you spot anything that needs correcting in this guide, feel free to DM me on Discord and I'll try and adjust that as soon as possible. And yeah, I hope that you have enjoyed the video,